Hello and welcome to DMA Center Stage. I'm your host, Hal Pittman, and on this episode we're here at the 14th century Hochst Castle outside of Frankfurt, Germany, which was the home to AFN Frankfurt headquarters for 20 years following World War II. AFN is celebrating its 80th anniversary of operations in Europe this week. Our guest today on Center Stage is Marine Corps General Michael Langley, Commander of U.S. Africa Command. There are 11 unified combatant commands, 7 with geographical areas of responsibility with regional military focus. U.S. Africa Command is the youngest geographic combatant command, and it became fully operational in 2008 in response to the U.S. expanding its partnerships and interests in Africa. General Langley became the 6th commander of U.S. AFRICOM in August 2022 and is responsible for all U.S. military operations and activities to protect and advance U.S. national interests in Africa. He joined us on Center Stage today to provide his insights on the region since taking command. General, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Hal.
First question, softball. Why does the world need a stable Africa?
Well, we'll just take it from the global perspective. Everything that happens on Africa has global implications. Global implications that affect U.S. interests in our overall global strategy. That's why Africa needs to be stabilized. A lot of things, what happens on Africa can resonate all through Europe or even in our own homeland. To wit, there's a number of things that happen. Not only just the conflict we actually hear about, but we look at other measures too, such as climate change. Climate change can beget famine, population displacement, and also stokes conflict. So why it matters is because of the global implications. So everything we do in AFRICOM to help our African partners stabilize the region so it can beget sustainability and prosperity in the future.
Got it. Now, since its inception, AFRICOM has employed a three-pronged approach: diplomacy, development, and defense. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, in short, we call it the 3D approach because we start at the national security strategy. When the president signed the national security strategy and passed it down to all the departments, all their interagencies, the whole of government approach, each combatant commander said, okay, whole of government approach, I need to engage with State Department. I need to engage and cooperate with all the activities that USAID does on the continent. So collectively, we have synergistic effects because all our activities, operations, and investments, we do that together in unison. So we can synchronize and sequence when we work with our African partners. So like I said, collectively, it gives us that synergistic effects in building partnership capacity with our African partners.
Right. Now, you're coming up on a year in command, right? Tell us about your priorities and some of what you would consider successes since you've been here.
I started off my tenure of command last August, and the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Austin, said, Langley, tell me what you need. He said, first, don't make it an anecdotal type assessment. You're going to get 90 days to do a holistic assessment. So the first thing I did, I said, okay, what are the strategic distractions that have happened in the past? I looked at them, and all of them kind of related to risk to force. I wanted to ensure that every man and woman on the continent of Africa doing operations could protect themselves. So we looked at increasing that, and we did that. Then we looked at risk to mission, looking at all the resources we need so we can continue our mission. Moreover, so we can engage with our African partners and hit similar goals that they see for stability and security. So in that 90 days, we actually identified what direction we need to do, and it's all codified in an AFRICOM campaign plan, and we're in execution right now. Whether it's the East Africa or West Africa, we have some of those same tenets in mind, and we start with this being African partner-led, but
Yes.
U.S. enabled.
Yes. So what have you learned in this year?
It has been a campaign of learning. My ways of going about it was to listen to our African partners. And within my AFRICOM AOR, I know there's 54 countries, but one of them belongs to CENTCOM, that being Egypt, but all other 53 are sovereign nations that have different interests. So I thought I need to start by listening to them, listening to their challenges, but also listening to how they see their opportunities, because they do absorb the fact that it is going to be African partner-led and U.S. enabled. So I learned it was a campaign of learning. Now I need to tell the story. As I go back to D.C., whether I'm talking across the interagency to State Department, to USAID or other interagencies, and tell them the story, how I see it, and how we can collectively work security. And on top of that, I need our oversight committees in Congress, they need to know the story as well.
So now you've described the U.S. participation in Africa as an investment, right? Tell us about that. Why do we need to invest in Africa?
That's a great question. When I looked at it, usually when I talk to members of the command, whether it be the staff or whether it be units out on the ground, they wonder, okay, we're putting a lot of work in there, a lot of resources, a lot of taxpayers' money into stabilizing Africa. I said, look at it this way. I wish I had a football analogy because I like to use sports analogies, but no, it was more fitting that I just started off with that first financial advisor when I was a young second lieutenant. He said, Lieutenant, you need to start investing now. You need to be consistent and you need to be persistent. Whether securities are down or up, you need to invest. We looked at it that way because he capped it off by saying compound interest is a beautiful thing. There's a lot of countries on the continent of Africa are kind of challenged right now, but they have so much potential. By 2050, they're going to have that continent is going to have the greatest population, probably about 2.5 billion people. A lot of challenges, but a lot of opportunity too. We're going to stick with these countries, our African partners, let them lead it as they realize their potential. So those investments will lead to compound interests,
Yes.
compound capabilities, and prosperity.
So obviously as a geographical combatant command, you have a number of exercises that you conduct throughout the year. Talk to us a little bit about the exercise program. What are some of the biggest exercises you do, and how do you interact with those partners?
I will tell you, the joint exercise program we have in place that's supported by our joint staff are some of the biggest that we have within DOD. I just got back from African Lion 23, over 18 countries, African countries participating, and our partners as well, and also observers. There were over 27 countries observing what we did in Morocco, what we did in Tunisia, and also in Ghana. That was tremendous. That buys us a lot of equity in these countries in cooperation, in interoperability, and assurance actions that we are the partners going forward. So our exercises, we leverage that going forward. African Lion proved it. In the maritime sense, we did the Obagami Express earlier in the year. A lot of contributing countries to that, or participating countries, and also observers. That is a message to the world that our African partners have the same values and same interests in achieving the same goals.
So let's talk about peer competitors for a minute. We know both China and Russia are active to some degree, in the African continent. So tell us a little bit how we're looking at that, and what does our role do as a counterweight?
We compete with the PRC and Russia on the continent of Africa. They have different interests, but some of the interests are convergent. Sometimes we have the same interests in mind with developing our African partners. So in that that case, yes, we can work together. We can work together as far as climate change, strategic health, and ensuring the African populations are not affected, such as by the pandemic or other diseases that really kind of stall their progress into the future. So there are some good things that our competitors do that is convergent interests. But across the security thing, sometimes there is competition for access and influence. So it's a healthy competition. And I think from the U.S. perspective, we give a value proposal for them to work with us and build partnership and capacity from a holistic sense. For example, violent extremist organizations. Violent extremist organizations is just not the security element. That's just not DOD. It's the 3D approach. So we compete with our partners by using that frontage to knowing that the enduring solution for our African partners is good governance across the board. That's how we compete. That's how we win.
So as a commander,
yes,
what keeps you up at night? What's on the top of the worry list?
Nothing keeps me up at night, and here's why.
That's great. That's great.
Nothing keeps me up at night because I have special trust and confidence in the men and women on the ground that stand to and that are on the watch when I go to sleep at night. So that 4 hours that I sleep soundly. Well, yeah, just joking there. But the men and women on the job at those times, I know that they know what I treasure in operational readiness. Operational readiness begets operational excellence. So their adherence to standards, their adherence to core values enables them to be able to execute the mission that we have laid out for them, that I have given them. As they execute and keeping in mind a risk to force and balancing that with risk to mission, they execute. So I sleep at night because they understand that mission, and I have special trust and confidence that they will execute it with all those things in mind.
Let's talk about you a little bit. So you come from a background of Air Force family, so I'm sure there's some fun competitiveness at home. What led you to the Corps? And then what's the family like, when you come home for family events?
Well, truthfully, I have a very diverse family. We have a very joint family. My extended family, I have sailors in the family as well. My stepsister, she was a sailor. My nephew, he was a soldier. So yes, I grew up in an Air Force family, but my extended family, historical family, especially on my mother's side, Lucius Caldwell was a World War II Marine. And then Willie Jr. Edmond, he was a Marine that fought in Vietnam. So there were some tenets in history on my mother's side of Marines. So yeah, I kind of grasped it at that. My father used to say, hey, look at the Air Force. You need to aim high. But when I started to aim high and I looked up on the hill, I saw the few and the proud. That's what made me a Marine.
Okay. Okay, so you've got a long track record, brilliant career. What is the best piece of mentoring advice that you received, one? And then what do you tell, young service members who are starting out?
Well, I'd say this, I had a number of mentors during my career, and they had always anchor yourself in the principles of leadership, anchor yourself in core values, and when you get in a leadership position, realize the potential of the men and women that you have the stewardship of a command over. Always look out for their interests, always take care of them. So that's what I learned from my mentors going forward. With all principles of leadership and traits, always harvest that and lead by example.
And is that what you pass on to the youngsters?
Yeah, so those that have aspirations for command, I pass some of those same things, but I add a few other things. Because when you take command, you seek unity of command, you seek unity of effort, unit cohesion. You're not always going to be dealt the hand that you want. You think of all the things you want your unit to do, and you want a team of blue chippers. And one general had told me one time, and it just resonated with me. He was talking about the varying Marines and sailors that would be assigned under me in my unit. He said, they're not always going to be all-stars. He used a sports analogy. He said, championships aren't won by the team that has the all-star players. See, championships are won by players that make an all-star team. I took that to heart. I took that to heart to build unit cohesion, to build unity of effort, taking the team, making them a team of varying degrees of talent.
Yes.
But making unity, effort, and unit cohesion, they will optimize the performance of that unit from unit readiness to operational excellence.
General, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you today. Do you have any words that you'd like to pass along to our audience? Anything else that you'd like to tell us?
Yes, I would say that AFRICOM prides themselves in executing the mission. We have a perspective of how much we feed into the globally integrated construct of security and stability and protecting U.S. interests and protecting the homeland. So everything we do, whether it's in East Africa, West Africa, or down in the South, or global access and influence around the perimeter of our 11.2 million square miles of the African continent, we're on the watch. So I really commend the men and women on the ground. I just want to be recognized for the hard work they're doing with a partnership-centric approach with our African partners. They are excelling.
So thank you, General. We've been speaking with General Michael Langley, Commander of U.S. AFRICOM. General, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us an overview of the U.S. Africa Command's mission and your insights into the region. I'm your host, Hal Pittman. Please join us for our next episode of Center Stage, where we'll continue to bring you some of the most interesting guests in national security, public policy, and business.